Welcome to our deep dive today into neuroeconomics.
Very cool.
It's how your brain really handles money and investing.
Yeah.
We're going deep with insights from Jason Zweig's book,
Okay.
Your Money and Your Brain. You are going to want to take notes on this one.
Really? This is a good one.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's a really good one. Have you ever wondered why a hot stock tip feels so good?
Oh, yeah.
Even if it's a terrible idea,
Oh,
we're going to get ready to learn how to use that brain of yours to make smarter money moves.
I like it. I like it. So what's so fascinating about Zweig's approach, he doesn't just rehash behavioral finance.
Right.
He combines it with the latest in neuroscience to show how the way our brains are wired
Mm-hmm.
can lead us to both brilliant and disastrous financial choices.
So he's basically saying that our brains are working against us when it comes to investing.
Well,
I'm already feeling a little nervous.
not exactly. It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
What Zweig reveals is that we actually have two systems in our brains for making decisions. He compares it to Spock versus McCoy
Oh, from Star Trek.
from Star Trek. Yeah.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
All right, so you have the reflexive system, which is fast, emotional, driven by intuition, gut feelings.
Okay.
That's your Dr. McCoy,
Shooting from the hip.
shooting from the hip. And then there's the reflective system,
Okay.
which is slow, deliberate, analytical,
Mm-hmm.
based on logic and reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's your Mr. Spock, always thinking things through.
So when it comes to investing, these two systems are basically battling it out in our heads.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Think about it. You see a hot stock tip,
Oh, yeah.
and your reflexive system is screaming, let's do this, quick profits.
Get in on that.
But your reflective system is urging caution,
Mhm.
saying, hold on, let's do some research, think long term.
That makes total sense.
Right.
But wouldn't you think that professional investors, like financial analysts, would be better at ignoring those emotional urges?
You'd think so, right. But even seasoned professionals get caught up in the story.
Re-
Yeah. Zweig highlights research that found over 91% of financial analysts believe that crafting a compelling story is essential when evaluating an investment.
Wow.
So even those who we think of as being purely data-driven
Yeah,
are still swayed by narratives.
that is pretty wild.
It is.
It seems like no one is immune to these emotional tugs.
No.
Is that what Zweig is getting at with this whole anchoring thing?
Yes. Anchoring is a cognitive bias where your brain latches onto the first piece of information it receives
Okay.
and uses it as a reference point for all following judgments.
Can you give me a real-world example of how this plays out?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Imagine you're house hunting.
Okay.
A clever real estate agent might show you the most expensive property first.
Mm-hmm.
This is done on purpose because it makes all the other houses seem more affordable in comparison,
Oh.
even if those houses are still overpriced for the market.
So that's how they get you.
Yeah.
Tricky. Tricky.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, if this anchoring bias is everywhere,
Yeah.
how do we avoid getting fooled?
The first step is awareness.
Okay.
Once you understand how anchoring works, you can start to question your assumptions.
Okay.
You can ask yourself, is this price really fair, or am I being influenced by some arbitrary anchor?
Mm-hmm.
Zweig even suggests trying a little experiment
Okay.
to illustrate how powerful anchoring can be.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question,
Okay.
without looking it up. What year do you think Attila the Hun sacked Rome?
Ooh. Okay. I'm gonna guess 800 AD.
800 AD.
I feel like I should know this.
Most people would guess a much later date than the actual year,
Okay.
which is 451 AD.
Oh, wow.
We tend to overestimate how recent historical events are because we're unconsciously anchored to the present day.
Wow, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
So anchoring can really warp our sense of perspective, not just with money, but with all kinds of things.
Yes.
Speaking of perspective, Zweig also talks about something called the investing fraction.
Yes.
What's that all about?
The investing fraction is a way of understanding the real impact of your investments. Zweig says it can be expressed as the dollar amount of your gain or loss
Mm-hmm.
divided by your total amount of wealth.
Okay, I'm already sensing a brain twister coming on here.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
It's important because it helps us focus on the right numbers.
Okay.
Our brains naturally gravitate towards the numerator,
Mm-hmm.
those exciting short-term gains or losses.
Yeah.
But it's the denominator, our total wealth,
Okay.
that actually matters most for long-term financial health.
So it's not about those daily ups and downs.
Right.
It's about the big picture.
It is.
I get it, but honestly, It's hard not to get excited when you see your portfolio going up, even if it's just a small percentage gain overall.
Totally understandable.
Yeah.
That's why understanding the investing fraction is so important.
Okay.
It helps us reframe our thinking.
Okay.
Think about it this way. If you have $200,000 invested
Hmm.
and it gains $1,000 today,
Yeah.
your brain might be fixated on that $1,000 jump.
Ooh.
But what really matters is the shift from $200,000 to $201,000 in total wealth.
Right.
That's the change that actually impacts your financial future.
Okay, I'm starting to see what you mean.
Yeah,
It's like zooming out to see the entire forest instead of getting distracted by a single shiny leaf.
exactly.
But let's be honest, those shiny leaves can be pretty tempting,
Yeah, they are.
especially when you think about things like the lottery, which Zweig also discusses in the book.
Yeah.
What's the deal with our brains and the lottery?
Well, Zweig points out that our brains get a huge dopamine rush from anticipating rewards.
Oh, yeah.
Think about that feeling you get when you buy a lottery ticket.
This could be it.
The possibility, however slim,
This is it.
of winning big is intoxicating.
Oh, it is.
But the problem is, our brains aren't very good at accurately processing probabilities,
Oh, okay.
especially when big potential rewards are involved.
So we get seduced by the dream, even if the odds are stacked against us. Kind of like that scene in Dumb and Dumber, where Lloyd is told his chances with Mary are 1 in a million, and he says, so you're telling me there's a chance?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
It captures how anticipation
Mm.
can override logic in our brains,
Right.
leading us to make irrational decisions.
Yeah.
Whether it's buying lottery tickets or chasing risky investments with low chances of success.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense, but it's also a little scary.
Yeah,
How do we avoid falling into these traps?
right.
Do we just have to become cold, calculating robots?
Not at all.
Okay.
But it is crucial to understand these tendencies.
Okay.
When you encounter an investment opportunity that seems too good to be true,
Yeah.
ask yourself 2 key questions.
Okay.
How big is the potential reward,
Mm-hmm.
and how likely am I to actually earn it?
Right.
Force yourself to think critically about the probabilities involved,
Yeah.
and don't let the excitement of a potential win cloud your judgment.
All right, so it sounds like we need to develop this internal Spock filter to counterbalance all these emotional urges and biases.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? Especially when it seems like everyone else is getting swept up in the hype.
That's where Zweig's insights about the Milgram experiment come in.
Okay.
It's a classic study that shows how powerful social pressure can be
Oh, yeah.
in the experiment.
Hold on.
Hey.
I think we need to pause here and let all this sink in for our listeners.
Sure,
We've covered a lot of ground already.
we have.
Spock versus McCoy, anchoring, the investing fraction.
It's a lot.
And now we're about to dive into the Milgram experiment.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest.
But it all ties together in some really fascinating ways.
It does.
So for those of you just joining us, we're deep diving into the world of neuroeconomics with Jason Zweig's Your Money and Your Brain.
That's right.
And trust me, you're going to want to hear what comes next.
Yes, you are.
We'll be right back with more brain-bending insights about fear, regret, and the surprising truth about happiness and wealth. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into neuroeconomics.
Oh, yeah.
We've been exploring how our emotions and biases can really mess with our financial decisions.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
But the goal here isn't to beat ourselves up for being human, right?
Right.
It's about understanding these tendencies so we can start making smarter choices.
Exactly.
And that's where Zweig's next point comes in.
Okay. Regret.
Oh, regret.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
It's like the monster lurking under the bed of every investment decision.
Exactly. And Zweig reveals that our brains are obsessed with avoiding regret.
Okay.
But here's the twist.
Okay.
We often misjudge what we'll actually regret.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so studies show that people tend to regret inaction more than action.
Mm.
For example, not selling a losing stock haunts us more than selling a winner too early, even though selling early might have actually been the better financial move in the long run.
So we beat ourselves up more for the things we didn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, it is counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Okay.
When we take action and it leads to a loss,
Mm-hmm.
we feel responsible,
Yeah.
like we messed up. But when we don't take action and miss out on a gain, it's easier to rationalize it away as
So-
something beyond our control.
I can see that if I make a bad trade, it's like, ugh, why did I do that? But
Exactly.
if I miss out on a big gain, I can always tell myself, well, it wasn't meant to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this insight can actually help us make bolder investment choices.
Okay.
We shouldn't be so afraid to make moves, even if there's a chance things won't go perfectly.
So we're learning to embrace a little healthy risk-taking,
Yes.
which leads us to another question that Zweig tackles.
Okay, so
Does more money actually equal more happiness?
the age-old question.
Right.
And Zweig's answer, which is backed by some pretty compelling research, might surprise you.
Okay.
He argues that beyond meeting our basic needs,
Mm-hmm.
accumulating more wealth doesn't necessarily translate to greater happiness.
Okay, I have to admit that one's a little hard to swallow,
I know.
especially when we're constantly bombarded with messages that say we need more to be happy.
Yes.
More money, more stuff, more everything.
It's a deeply ingrained belief, for sure.
Yeah.
But Zweig cites a fascinating study that compared happiness levels
Okay.
among Forbes' 400 members,
Mm-hmm.
the wealthiest Americans,
Okay.
to average middle-class citizens.
Okay.
And the results showed that despite their enormous fortunes,
Mm-hmm.
the Forbes 400 folks reported only slightly higher levels of happiness.
So all those yachts and private jets don't actually buy that much extra joy?
Yeah,
That's kind of liberating, actually.
it is.
Yeah.
It suggests that true happiness doesn't come from material possessions,
Mm-hmm.
but from things like meaningful relationships, purpose-driven work,
Right.
a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Now that you mention it, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But if we're not supposed to be chasing wealth for happiness,
Pretty.
then what are we doing all this for? What's the point of trying to make smart financial decisions if it's not going to make us happier?
That's a great question, and it's one that Zweig addresses in the book.
Okay.
He argues that while money can't buy happiness directly,
Mm-hmm.
it can buy you freedom and security.
Okay.
It can give you the ability to pursue your passions,
Right.
to spend time with loved ones,
Yeah.
to make a difference in the world.
Okay.
And those are the things that ultimately lead to a fulfilling life.
So it's about using money as a tool to create the life you want,
Yes.
rather than seeing it as the end goal in itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about shifting your focus
Mhm.
from accumulating wealth,
Okay.
using it in ways that align with your values and bring you joy.
This is all really insightful stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering how we actually put this knowledge into practice. How do we rewire our brains to make smarter financial choices, especially when we're constantly bombarded with temptations and conflicting information?
That's where Zweig's practical advice comes in.
Okay.
He offers a ton of strategies for harnessing the power of our brains to make better decisions.
Okay.
He talks about things like controlling the controllable,
Okay.
practicing with a paper portfolio,
Mm.
and developing contrarian thinking.
Mm.
He even has a checklist called the Think Twice Guide to help us avoid making impulsive choices.
Okay, I'm definitely going to need to hear more about that Think Twice guide.
Right.
But before we get into all the practical tips and tricks, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Fear.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about how fear can drive us to make bad decisions.
Right.
But how do we actually overcome it?
Fear is a powerful emotion, especially when it comes to our money.
Yeah.
But Zweig offers some really helpful strategies for dealing with it.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of getting it off your mind,
Okay.
creating a John Candy moment, and even tracking our feelings in an emotional registry.
Okay, those are some interesting ideas. I'm
Mhm.
really curious to hear more about how all of this works.
Well, let's dive into that in our final segment.
Okay.
We'll explore all of Zweig's practical tips
Right.
for harnessing the power of neuroeconomics to achieve true financial well-being.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into your money and your brain.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground, and honestly, some of it has been kind of unsettling.
it can be.
It's a little scary to realize how much our financial decisions are influenced by things we're not even aware of.
Right.
Exactly. But here's the good news. Zweig doesn't just point out the problems.
It doesn't.
He actually offers a bunch of practical advice for harnessing the power of our brains to make smarter choices.
He does.
So while we can't entirely eliminate our emotional responses, we can learn to manage them better.
We can.
And one of the most important steps, as we've discussed, is to engage our reflective system, that inner Mr. Spock.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to slow down, take a breath, and really think things through.
Yeah.
But Are there specific strategies we can use to give Spock a fighting chance against our impulsive Dr. McCoy?
Absolutely. Zweig highlights several tactics.
Okay.
One of my favorites is what he calls controlling the controllable.
Okay, I'm all about control, especially when it comes to my money.
Yes.
So what does that look like in practice?
It means focusing on the aspects of investing that we can actually influence.
Okay.
For example, we might not be able to predict the market's every move,
Right.
but we can control our expectations.
Okay.
We can set realistic goals based on historical data rather than getting caught up in hype and wishful thinking.
That makes sense. It's about staying grounded in reality rather than chasing impossible dreams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can also control our risk by always considering the potential downside of an investment.
Okay.
Zweig reminds us that even the greatest investors in the world are wrong nearly half the time.
So it's not about avoiding losses altogether. It's about having a plan for when they inevitably happen.
Right.
Oh.
And another crucial aspect of controlling the controllable is keeping our investing costs low.
Yeah.
This means being mindful of fees, commissions, and taxes.
Right.
High expenses can eat away at our returns, regardless of how well our investments perform.
Yeah, I'm always looking for ways to save money, so tell me more about how to minimize those costs.
Well, Zweig recommends sticking with low-cost index funds whenever possible.
Okay.
He also suggests negotiating lower commissions with brokers and holding investments for at least a year to reduce capital gains taxes.
Those are great tips, but it sounds like there's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
Is there a way to make sure we're not overlooking anything important?
That's where Zweig's Think Twice checklist comes in.
Okay.
It's a set of questions designed to help us make well-considered decisions rather than acting impulsively.
I love that it's like having a pre-flight checklist for our investments, making sure we haven't forgotten anything crucial before we take off.
It's a great analogy. And another thing Zweig emphasizes is the importance of practice.
Okay.
He recommends running a paper portfolio for a year,
Okay.
testing out different strategies without risking real money.
So it's like training wheels for our investing brains.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It allows us to experiment, make mistakes, and learn in a safe environment.
This is all great stuff, but I think we need to come back to the topic of fear.
Okay.
We've talked about how fear can lead us to make bad decisions, but how do we actually overcome it?
Zweig has some excellent advice for dealing with fear. He suggests a few key strategies.
Okay.
First, he recommends getting it off your mind.
Oh.
When a risk goes bad,
Right.
it can consume our thoughts and make it hard to think clearly.
So how do we get it off our minds? Do we just try to ignore it?
Not exactly. Zweig suggests finding ways to detach and shift our focus.
Okay.
He talks about creating a John Candy moment.
Okay.
Remember that scene in the Super Bowl where Joe Montana pointed out John Candy in the stands to distract his teammates from the pressure of the game?
I remember that.
Yeah,
It's about finding a way to break the tension and lighten the mood.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes simply stepping away from the situation, taking a walk, hitting the gym, or calling a friend can help us gain perspective
Right.
and return to the problem with a clearer head.
So it's about finding healthy coping mechanisms for dealing with the ups and downs of investing.
Right. And Zweig also recommends something he calls an emotional registry.
Okay.
It involves tracking your feelings in a journal,
Okay.
noting how your moods fluctuate alongside the market.
So we're basically becoming more aware of our own internal weather patterns?
Yes.
When we tend to get stormy and when we're more likely to experience sunshine.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this self-awareness is key to developing what Zweig calls contrarian thinking.
Okay.
Learning to see fear as a buying opportunity and excessive enthusiasm as a signal to sell.
Okay. That's a superpower I definitely want to develop.
It is.
Buying when everyone else is running for the hills, that takes some serious courage.
It does. But remember the Milgram experiment.
Right.
Sometimes going against the crowd is the smartest move.
Right.
Zweig also emphasizes the importance of having a clear investment policy statement,
Okay.
a set of rules that guide your decision-making.
Mm-hmm.
This can help you stay disciplined and avoid making emotional choices in the heat of the moment.
It's like having a personal constitution for your finances, outlining your values and guiding principles.
I love that analogy. And finally, Zweig reminds us to take a long-term perspective.
Okay.
The market is cyclical.
Yeah.
There will be upswings and downswings.
Right.
But if we focus on the long game,
Right.
riding out the volatility rather than reacting to every twist and turn,
Yeah.
we're more likely to achieve our financial goals.
So it's about having the patience and discipline to stay the course even when the going gets tough.
Precisely. It's about remembering that investing is a marathon, not a sprint.
Well, there you have it.
There you go.
That concludes our deep dive into the fascinating world of neuroeconomics.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot about how our brains work,
We have?
both for us and against us when it comes to money.
Right.
And we've explored some really powerful strategies for making smarter financial decisions.
We have.
If you've been listening closely, your brain is probably feeling a bit full right now.
I bet.
But that's a good thing. It means you're stretching those mental muscles and expanding your understanding of how you think.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the beginning.
Yep.
We encourage you to explore Jason Zweig's book, Your Money and Your Brain, for yourself.
Yes.
It's packed with insights that can help you on your journey to financial well-being.
Absolutely.
As you navigate the complex world of money and investing, remember to be kind to yourself.
Yeah,
We all make mistakes, we all have biases.
we do.
But with awareness, practice, and a little bit of Spock-like logic, we can all learn to make smarter choices. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay.
If money can't buy happiness, what can? How can you use your resources to create a life that's truly fulfilling?
Good question.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those brains engaged.
So long.